My name is Evan Geissler. The game that I'm working on is called Embervein, and I am the lead programmer.
And can you give us an overview of what Embervein is about?
So Embervein is a co-op multiplayer game where the players take on waves of enemies and try to get as far in the game as possible by working together with class-based characters.
And how big is your team, and how far into development is Embervein?
Our team is about five workers large. There's myself, the lead, and some concept artists and some actually 3D modelers as well. We're not too far into development. We're about 6 months in. We're hoping by the end of November, end of December, that we can get some solid gameplay for some good demos.
And do you have any sort of time frame for like a final release?
No, we don't have a time frame for a release quite yet. Hopefully sometime early next year.
What platforms are you going for?
We're hoping to get on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC.
What's one thing that you want people to take away from seeing or playing your game?
I think we are really focusing on the art side of things. We really have a unique look to it. It's not too realistic, it's not too cartoony, but it's that perfect kind of balance between, and just having that multiplayer experience where players can play with each other and just have a fun time doing it.
And there is a precedent for this sort of game. We've seen Call of Duty Zombies in the past. There's Killing Floor, Left 4 Dead. How does Embervein work to set itself apart from what's come before, or what sort of inspiration did you take from those games?
So we wanted to kind of differentiate ourselves from Left 4 Dead and Call of Duty Nazi Zombies by adding a bit of a twist to the game. So instead of, like, say, humans taking on zombies, we wanted to kind of take creatures that we created and have them facing off against like waves of enemies that aren't just hordes of zombies that are just coming in aimlessly, that aren't necessarily very smart. The enemies themselves are going to be smarter. They're trained, essentially a trained private army that's coming in smarter, they're coming in better. They're not just swarming the player, but they're coming in with an understanding that they can't just swarm the player and hope that they can just take it on at once.
And the goal is to build cooperation with these different creature characters that can do very different things. Can you go into a little bit more detail about the characters as they are right now?
So our characters, like I said, each has their own backstory and their own class. So we have a tank character, a melee character, healer, and soon range character. So say the tank character is a little slower, he's bulkier, he can block a lot more damage, he can shield the other players. So a player that is using a class that has less health, that might have a higher damage, could use the tank character to block enemies coming in and block the damage while they try to pick off other enemies.
And is this entirely focused on multiplayer, or will there be any sort of single player mode to it?
Even though multiplayer is a big focus, we will have single player, so you can play from 1 to 4 players.
And the enemies themselves, they, as you said, they're not just like mindless zombies. They're soldiers, and there are different forms of them. Like, how does the game work to introduce these threats? Do you have like the drones? Are there specialized enemies? How does it ramp up the threat?
So our enemies, we decided that in the first waves, it'll just be easier enemies, just some basic things like some melee enemies, some rifle enemies, and then as the game progresses, they get smarter and harder, higher damage, higher health. But on top of that, we're bringing in different types of enemies. So instead of just, say, a rifle enemy, we're going to have ranged enemies that, say, shoot rockets, things like that. So the enemy types are changing to reflect the increase of damage. So later on, you might also have enemies that have higher armor as well visually. So it's not just like looking at the enemy and knowing that it has higher health, but visually being able to see that they have higher health.
And so it might be safe to say that where games like Nazi Zombies have mostly just ramped up by giving you more enemies and just sort of trying to overwhelm you with a flood. There might be a little bit more tactics and strategy here.
Yeah, definitely. So unlike Call of Duty, like the Nazi zombies, where, like you said, there's just a bunch of zombies coming at you, and as the waves increase, there's just more zombies. It might be a little bit more difficult, but ours, you do have to think a bit smarter, because even though you are going to have more enemies, they're going to be harder, they're going to be more difficult. Because if you have like a rifle enemy versus a rocket launcher enemy, you have a bullet versus an explosion, so you have to change how you're playing to account for that.
Though there are 4 characters confirmed, like in development, working on right now, is there room to develop more characters, more classes, and more archetypes as you go on with this game?
Yeah, so as we continue development, we're hoping that we release the game with our 4 initial characters, but we are planning on releasing content after that. We don't necessarily have talks to add more characters, but it is open to the possibility of adding more characters. It would be quite easy to do that. We would just need to add the balances into the gameplay, make sure that they're not overpowered or underpowered. But there is definitely room for initial release, just the 4 base characters. However, in future content, I wouldn't be surprised if we do add more.
For the scenario itself that you're playing in, is there just what's the are we dealing with like one main map that players will play on and become familiar with, or are there different scenarios to play?
So currently we just have one map, but we are planning on having at least 4 other maps that the players can progress through. And the story will follow the different areas, and each will have its own differences to it. As far as different scenarios per map, as far as I know, we don't currently have plans to have different scenarios for the maps. But again, that would be something that would be quite easy to implement. Or if, say after release, if we want to add like specific scenarios, like all the enemies are rocket launcher enemies, then we can easily bring that into the gameplay.
Is there anything you want to add at the end of this?
Not that I can think of. We try to get devlogs out every 2 weeks. So if you look up Embervein online, we have a website, we have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, that you can follow us, and we post a bunch of information on that as well.